As we've also seen in recent weeks, the North Koreans are making increasingly personal remarks about President Park and the ROK, and that's never a good sign. But earlier on in her term, the North Koreans greeted the new ROK president and also greeted the second term of the Obama administration, greeted the new Chinese leader and greeted a new Japanese leader with an almost unprecedented outburst of rhetoric and threats. Some of them general, some of them rather specific, but all of them much more severe than almost anything that we've ever heard coming out of Pyongyang and coming out of North Korea, which is saying a lot for all of you who have been following their rhetoric over the years. Among the various threats that North Korea made were very specific threats to use their nuclear weapons, specifically against the United States and cities in the United States. And I was reminded as things began to calm down that perhaps one of the most important takeaways of this very rough patch that we've been through with North Korea is that we need to remember that North Korea today is the only country in the world that has vocally and repeatedly threatened to use nuclear weapons. That's a very dubious distinction, and it's a very disturbing one. The good news is that a combination of U.S. ROK coordination and firmness helped calm the troubled waters that North Korea was stirring up in recent months. And there has been indeed a calming of the rhetoric. We're not hearing the almost daily breastbeating threats coming out of Pyongyang. I think there are several reasons why things have calmed down, in addition to the fact that the U.S. and ROK were working in lockstep and were very clear and firm about how they would respond to a physical provocation as opposed to a rhetorical provocation from North Korea. I think the other reasons that things have calmed down include the fact that North Korea, by the very nature of its economy, which is always shaky at best, cannot physically sustain the level of military mobilization that it engaged in earlier this year. A country of 23 million people with a military that's over a million people under arms, with a very shaky economic foundation, is just unable to keep up for weeks and weeks on end the level of military mobilization and alert and training, et cetera, that it was having to maintain during the height of this crisis. So I think that's another reason why things have calmed down. I think another reason is that when late April and early May come around every year, one of the most important tasks of the North Korean military is to go out into the fields and help the farmers. So these hundreds of thousands of North Korean soldiers every spring get out into the fields, and if they don't, the North Korean people are going to eat even less than they normally do in September, October, and November. So that was another incentive, if you will, for the North Koreans to begin to ratchet down the rhetoric and ratchet down the temperature, if you will, on the Korean Peninsula. There's another very practical reason as well, and that is that with the freezing of the Kaesong Industrial Project and the withdrawal of South Korean managers and, of course, of the North Korean workers, the North Koreans were having to forego a pretty substantial income stream that comes out of the Kaesong Project. Some estimates put the number as high as between $90 and $100 million a year are earned by North Korea from that facility at Kaesong, and shutting it down has not only put 53,000 North Koreans out of work, but 200,000+ family members who are also unable to sustain themselves as a result of the fact that this income is not coming in. So I think that was another incentive bringing the North Koreans back down to earth and back to reality. Beyond that, I think the North Koreans were also concerned about alienating a major source of aid and sustenance, and that is China. China, I think, has been quietly, in its own way, pressuring the North Koreans, urging them to get back to the table, urging them to reduce the level of tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And I think the Chinese efforts behind the scenes have been helpful. Building on a point that Ambassador Lord mentioned a little bit earlier, I would tend to agree with him that I think that the Chinese shift in terms of being willing to put more pressure on North Korea, being more critical, privately and publicly, of North Korea. I think this shift is more tactical than it is strategic. I think fundamentally, at the end of the day, I don't think that the fundamental Chinese strategic calculus on the Korean Peninsula has changed. I still think that at the end of the day, China sees the continued existence of North Korea, even a problematic and troublesome North Korea, as better than a North Korea that goes out of business.